Get started. Now please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Joppa. He will provide us with an overview of the data revolution and what it means to the environment. Lucas is an environmental scientist at Microsoft Research, where he leads engagements on environmental sustainability and heads a research program in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and ubiquitous computing technology for monitoring, modeling, and managing Earth's natural environment. Recently, Lucas co-founded the Nature Plus Computing Group, a diverse collection of scientists drawn from Microsoft Research, who develop and apply the tools of data science to scientific data and whose research interests are focused on the study of nature. Full biographical information for Lucas and all of our other speakers is included in the program. Pleased to welcome Lucas Joppa to the podium.
Talk about the big data revolution and particularly what that means for environmental science. I've taken a look at the lineup. I have the honor of being the first speaker in this conference, but there's a fantastic lineup over the next 2 days of speakers that are tackling kind of at a meta level an overview of what big data will mean for the environment and then particular applications within it. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited to be here, just to kind of set things up, is because I actually think this topic of big data and the environment really intersects really cleanly the two fundamental ages that we're alive in today and that this conference is taking part in. So the first is the data deluge, right? Really characterized by this massive influx of data from the ubiquitous computing devices, from the laptops and the smartphones and the myriad sensors that we have all around us, that are really starting to fundamentally influence human societies and economies, with the Anthropocene, right, which is characterized by exponentially accelerating negative impacts of human activities on Earth's natural systems. And so I've had the good fortune, I guess, of kind of being a child of both of those two ages. And it's always been pretty clear to me from the first time I started thinking about these issues that A, they were going to be the kind of defining ages of our time, and B, that if I really wanted to help make a difference, I was going to have to figure out a way to structure my career in order to straddle both of those two worlds. And so my formal education has been on the environmental science side. My undergrad's in wildlife ecology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, my PhD's in conservation and ecology from Duke's Nicholas School. But then after that, I moved to Microsoft, and particularly Microsoft Research, where I lead our environmental research programs on monitoring, modeling, and managing environmental systems. And so it's really from that kind of perch that I want to talk about big data. I'm not going to get into the really thorny task of trying to define big data. We argue whether it's 3 V's, 4 V's, 6 V's. I've got a great slide that I took out of Batman slapping Robin about saying veracity, because veracity is a measure of magnitude, right? So we can have an entire conference around what V's define big data. But for sure, volume, variety, and velocity are 3 fundamental issues that we have to think about with the amount of data coming in every day. And what I want to talk about first is how big data and the information age have really modified and altered the way the computing industry thinks. And so, what we've really figured out from an infrastructure perspective is how to start collecting enormous volumes, varieties, of data at extremely high velocity. How to store those data in long-term centralized repositories. How to communicate those data all around the world to different people. How to deploy the analytics necessary. This is a key point that I'm going to be talking about through my talk. To turn those data actually into some sort of information that people care about. And then offer up that information through various portals and gateways so that people can start to make informed decisions about it. And if you've paid attention to the news over the past couple of years, you'll see that the computing industry's success in doing all of this has really started to reawaken long-held ambitions to create a more general artificial intelligence capable of human-level thought and cognition. But if you've paid attention to what's actually going on, you'll see that we're still a long way away from any sort of generalized artificial intelligence. For the time being, and probably for the foreseeable future, the human brain will remain the most powerful prediction engine ever to grace this planet. But in a much more narrow sense, we have seen some pretty exceptional performance in like I said, what we call narrow AI, particularly powered by things like deep learning and other machine learning architectures that have taken what used to be kind of the realm of science fiction and really put it in the hands of consumers and customers with just the click of a button or a few lines of code. So for instance, we're now beyond human level abilities for speech recognition. Although, if you're using Cortana or Siri or one of these other assistants, you might doubt that. But statistics don't lie, unless I'm the one doing the statistics. So we're also beyond human-level capacity in image recognition as well. So we're starting to figure out how to augment the things that humans are good at, but can't really do at scale with computing technologies that can do that at a much broader level, right? And it's not just audio and imagery. For instance, we're starting to get to a place where narrow domains of artificial intelligence will make things like driving cars and flying planes simply safer and more efficient than if we were to do these things ourselves. And so it's not just classifying things, into what's in a photo or what's in a picture. What we've been able to do is build extremely complex and sophisticated computing environments that are backed by an enormous amount of data collected by things like laptops on every desk, smartphones in every hand, don't forget credit cards in every wallet. And what that's allowed us to do in one sense is really begin to track and sense the pulse of human behavior in really fantastic ways, right? So everybody's got their favorite example. This is an oldie but goodie, right? About how Target's data-driven algorithms collected from millions of consumers all over their operations, buying tens of millions of items, are able to do things like try to sell diapers to a woman who doesn't yet know that she's pregnant, but is, right? So, and this, like I said, this is an old one, and there's many more that are coming out that show that when we do have our hands on this amount of data, this amount of information, we're able to build predictive systems that sometimes confuse even the humans that built them and how it's possible that we're able to get that level of accuracy. So that's great if you're interested in selling people stuff, and maybe some of you are, but I think most of us are interested in the environment and the role that big data and artificial intelligence can play in helping us more efficiently monitor, model, and manage environmental systems. And we've got a huge challenge there, right? Human society at the moment is faced with a pretty unprecedented challenge. This is the way I kind of compress things in my head. We've got to adapt and mitigate to a changing climate, ensure resilient water, sustainably feed growing population to 10 billion people, all while stemming a pretty catastrophic loss of biodiversity, right? And as somebody who has a foot in kind of both camps and who spends a lot of time on the science side studying these environmental problems, it's become pretty shockingly clear to me that time is too short and resources are pretty much way too thin to achieve this without the empowering potential of information age technologies, artificial intelligence, and the big data that backs it. I mean, if you look at it, the information gap between what we know and don't know is way too big. The scope and scale of what we currently know is way too small. The speed that we're changing that is way too slow. And then if you just kind of extrapolate out into the future, you see, if you paid attention to any of these estimates of how much it might cost to change things under the current status quo, the cost is just way, way too high. And so the good news is that when we do put our minds to it and we start to apply, when we start to collect enough data and we start to apply sophisticated enough algorithms with robust enough engineering, you can start to get this glimpse of where we might be going when it comes to environmental monitoring. So, for instance, we're able, like I said, to take not just algorithms to understand what people are saying or what people are in photos, but we can increasingly use those same algorithms that were trained on those sorts of things to understand what species are in acoustic files, allowing us to start to monitor ecosystems at a much broader scale. We can do that with imagery as well. For instance, I'm sure many of you are aware of the various different apps out there that will help you identify species that you can take photos of and do that automatically. We can do that for birds in the past example, plants in this instance. This is how many people here have heard of the term deep neural networks or deep learning? Okay, good. So how many of you have kind of wrapped your head around what's actually going on in a deep neural network or a convolutional neural network? Right, okay, I mean, I think about it all the time and I still haven't really wrapped my head around it. But if you really want to know, this is a great example. This actually doesn't help you at all. But these blocks up here are kind of trying to show the resolution is very good. They're kind of the feature extraction space that the multiple levels of the deep neural network will actually go after when they're trying to classify things like these plants. This is a team of Microsoft researchers out of our Beijing lab who worked with a botanical society in China to build out a deep learning application for recognizing plant species. But of course, it's not just recognizing that something's one species or not. We can actually go a step further. And we can use the same sorts of algorithms that, for instance, Facebook uses to tag everybody in your photos to understand down to the individual which animals are in particular photos or in acoustics as well. This is a great application called WildMe, which is an organization dedicated to applying artificial intelligence and citizen science to conservation problems, and they've got a big library of algorithms that are capable of doing, cheetah recognition and whale shark recognition and a bunch of other applications as well. And it's not just figuring out what's in there, but we're increasingly able to contextualize what's going on inside of a photo. I just did this last night because Microsoft has this service called CaptionBot, which most of you may or may not know of, but you probably definitely don't think of in the sense of environmental monitoring, right? This is a service that you can send a photo to and it will send you back an automatically generated caption of it. So here I just uploaded this photo of a zebra in Kenya, and it comes back and it says, I think it's a zebra standing on top of a dry grass field, right? And from that, I start getting a lot of contextual information about both the animal, its environment, because if I also apply those other algorithms, I know what animal, I know who that animal is, I know what it's doing, I sometimes will understand its social structure, and a lot more. And so some collaborators and I are actually using this, and we have some nice early results showing that just from digital safari photos that are being shared on social media platforms, when we start throwing a bunch of algorithms at it to identify what species are in there, which individuals and what they're doing, we're getting a pretty good estimate of wildlife population abundance across large geographic areas just by looking at the photos that are being shared online. And then, of course, from a higher level view, we're able to use these same sorts of algorithms to begin to turn, raw, high-resolution aerial imagery. I think Matt Hansen's going to be talking as well sometime, either today or tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about this. But able to turn high-resolution imagery from satellites or from airplanes flying overhead into actually classified information, right, about what is on the land, where it is, how much of it there is, and how it's changing over time. We're at the very beginning stages of being able to start to understand what's out there in a much wider perspective. If you look at applications like environmental DNA, for instance, we're starting to be able to use blood samples to parse out what species are where, who's been feeding on whom, and all sorts of things like that. This is a project in Microsoft Research called Project Premonition, where what we're doing is we're building new mosquito traps, as you can see on your right-hand side of the screen there, flying them around, deploying those with drones, and then coming back and picking them up when they're full. And what's interesting about these mosquito traps is we're able to understand from the visual signals of, the visual signals of the mosquito's wing beats, A, whether or not it's a mosquito, and B, what species of mosquito it is, and then choose whether or not that's a mosquito that we want to close the door on and catch. And that allows us to narrow down the target that we're trying to capture, bring those mosquitoes back into the lab and begin to parse out all of the species that those mosquitoes have been feeding on, and be able to get a species richness estimate of that ecosystem from these mosquitoes that are flying around doing all of our data collection for us. And so, you know, one of the things about big data is trying to figure out how do you actually start to collect almost uncontrollable and almost unfilterable amount of data, right? So one way is to think about non-traditional ways of collecting data, like using mosquitoes as your data collection instruments for you. The other is trying to take traditional ways of collecting data, i.e. putting people out in the field, and figuring out how to scale that up significantly. So using technology to take away some of the required expertise and lower the bar for people to be able to engage and collect scientifically valid data. There's some great examples of organizations here in the US working on this. eBird's a fantastic and well-known one. iNaturalist is one that I have a long history of working with as well. And what they've really showed me is that you really can, if you give people the right technology, you really can empower them to go out and start collecting hugely important data that can tell us about patterns and processes of environmental systems at a national scale. And it's not just people, of course, the algorithms and the technology are allowing us to deploy sensors at a pretty unprecedented scale. Some of these which are fixed in space, but other ones which the public seems to get much more excited about, like robots swimming around underwater or drones flying in the air. And this is a domain that I have a bit more experience in, trying to attach sensors to animals and having them go out and do all of your data collection for you. And of course, if we go one step further, we have this ever-increasing satellite of constellation of satellites circling around, peering down on Earth every day. And when those data come back, this is why I think we struggle with definitions of what big data are, because the landscape and the industry is moving almost as fast as our ability to create problems for it, right? That's why companies like Microsoft exist, to solve those problems, and then for society to pose another one and for us to solve them again. And so, you know, if you look at for instance, our cloud platform, Azure, it is dedicated to everything from small single computer instance problems all the way up to true high performance computing. And so when we have a lot of data of high volume of many different types and coming in with high velocity, there are multiple architectures out there from Microsoft and others that can handle these data, that can crunch through them in a pretty incredible amount of time. So this was something that Microsoft just announced recently that kind of blew my mind a little bit from a big data perspective, right? Because, so I'm not sure about the marketing angle on it, because they call it Azure, the world's first AI supercomputer, but one of the demos that they did was, to back up a little bit, they saturated Azure, our cloud computing platform, with FPGA chips, which are programmable hardware, basically, that allow you to do specific tasks, specific computing tasks across a lot of data really, really fast. And the example that they showed was with using all of the FPGA chips in Azure. Our research team in this space was able to translate the entire corpus of Wikipedia in less than 1/10 of a second between any two languages that were capable of doing translation. Right? So, on the one hand, yes, there are a lot of data, but on the other hand, we're getting pretty good at cranking through them, right? And so, that's going to get me to a point in just a second. But for me, I step back and I think about it, and I see, like I said, this glimmer of what's possible. In kind of the words of all the engineers that I work every day, we're starting to put together the building blocks of a system that's able to monitor Earth's operating system and then figure out how to debug it when things start to go wrong. So there's huge potential there. That's where I think big data and environment is going. I think we're moving towards a single consolidated system that we're able to interrogate at any time to understand the state of our planet, kind of a Bloomberg terminal of Earth, if you will. But this is actually kind of why I'm here, to come and talk to the system of systems, the organization of organizations, which is kind of talk about the bad news. And that's because in my mind, we're not nearly focused enough and we're not nearly integrated enough to come close to realizing that ambition. We've got a lot of different pieces out there. We're capable of putting these things together, but for some reason, we're not. And so if the information age has taught us one thing, it's that the value of information is accelerated exponentially through integration, and by having a motivation to collect those data, deploy analytics on them, and give access to that information to people all around the world. Now, in the computing industry, we've generally had business models for that, right? You have a business model, our competitors each have business models. So what's going to drive the integration? What's going to drive the focus here in the United States to help us start to bring all of these component pieces together? I feel pretty strongly that the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology back in 2011 gave us a pretty strong recommendation on a path forward when they made a major recommendation to create and repeat a national ecosystem assessment process. And so, in a recent policy forum, my co-authors, not one of them, Stephanie, is back in the audience as well, reiterated that call for the United States to create a national sustained U.S. ecosystem assessment that would provide a focusing point, a rationale, and a motivation to bring together all of these pieces to really start to take the pulse of the U.S. ecosystems in the same way that we already do on a daily basis take the pulse of the U.S. economy. And the analogy that we brought, or the analogy that we made was I think it went something like a orchestra without a conductor, right? And that's the point, kind of tortuously, that I've been trying to make in this talk, which is that there are all of these pieces. There's all the players sitting there waiting. I'm not concerned from with one foot in the technology camp. I'm not that concerned that the technology won't be able to assist in this process. I'm not concerned that we don't have the engineering chops and the algorithmic understanding to be able to deploy sensors across the US, to be able to bring tons of data together, to be able to ask questions about it, to be able to start to get a holistic understanding of the state of the United States ecosystems. What I am concerned about is that without a motivating force, without a conductor up there bringing everybody into the same score, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of noise, and a lot of people are doing things really well themselves, but we're struggling to articulate how to put that all together. And so I'm actually going to end my talk a little bit early because what I wanted to do was have some time for questions and answer, have a bit of open conversation about this topic. Think about how RNRF might be able to play a role in helping the private sector understand how we can most efficiently and effectively bring our resources to bear on these problems in a non-political way, and to figure out how we can help, really. And so that's why I'm here.